On May 22, 2013, paramedics responded to a 911 call in Palmdale, California. Inside a small apartment, they found 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez unconscious, his tiny body battered and bruised beyond comprehension. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors were horrified by what they saw. A skull fracture, broken ribs, burned skin, BB pellets embedded in his body, and clear signs of prolonged torture. Gabriel was declared brain-dead and placed on life support. 2 days later, he died. The nation would soon come to know his name, his face, and his unimaginable suffering. But behind the headlines and the outrage was a tragic pattern of silence, of neglect, and of a system that failed a child crying out for help. Gabriel didn't just slip through the cracks, he was shoved through them. Born in February 2005, Gabriel had a difficult start. His mother, Pearl Fernandez, had a history of drug use and unstable relationships. Gabriel was initially placed with relatives, including his great-uncle and grandparents, who provided him with some stability. For the first few years of his life, Gabriel seemed to thrive in their care. He was described as shy but affectionate, a boy who loved animals and dreamed of becoming a police officer. But in 2012, Pearl suddenly reclaimed custody of Gabriel. According to later reports, this decision came despite warnings from relatives and concerns expressed to the Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS. Pearl, along with her boyfriend Isauro Aguirre, took Gabriel into their Palmdale apartment. It would mark the beginning of an unspeakable nightmare. Almost immediately, Gabriel's life deteriorated. He was repeatedly beaten, forced to eat cat litter, locked in a cabinet, and pepper-sprayed. At school, Gabriel's teacher Jennifer Garcia noticed the signs. Bruises on his face, a swollen eye, chunks of hair missing. Each time she reported the abuse to social workers, nothing happened. Gabriel once wrote a note to his teacher asking, "Can you call the police?" It was a desperate plea that would go unanswered. Incredibly, Gabriel's injuries were so obvious that other adults also reported them, including a security guard and a counselor. Yet each time, DCFS failed to intervene in a meaningful way. Caseworkers visited the home but filed no emergency action. One even admitted to being intimidated by Aguirre. The system designed to protect Gabriel not only failed to act, it enabled his abusers. In his final weeks, Gabriel's abuse escalated. Prosecutors later revealed that Isauro Aguirre inflicted most of the physical violence, but Pearl Fernandez allowed it to continue. Gabriel was punished for playing with dolls or showing signs of affection, his abusers calling him gay and using it as justification for further brutality. The levels of torture were so extreme that even seasoned law enforcement officers wept in court during trial testimony. On the night of May 22nd, Isauro Aguirre called 911, claiming Gabriel wasn't breathing. When paramedics arrived, they found the boy unresponsive, covered in injuries, with burn marks on his feet and cigarette burns on his body. He had been beaten with a baseball bat and shot with a BB gun. His heart had stopped at least twice before making it to the hospital. Doctors fought to save him, but it was too late. Gabriel's injuries were consistent with prolonged and systematic torture. Medical professionals, police officers, and the media were stunned. This wasn't a case of neglect. It was sadistic abuse that lasted for months, in full view of those who should have stopped it. When Gabriel passed away on May 24, 2013, his death certificate listed the cause as blunt force trauma and neglect. But the true cause, many believed, was deeper. A toxic mix of domestic violence, institutional apathy, and societal indifference. The case sent shockwaves through California and the nation. How could this happen in a modern society? How did so many fail one child? Gabriel's face became a symbol of the hidden horrors happening behind closed doors. Not just in Palmdale, but in neighborhoods everywhere. In the aftermath, the community demanded justice. And for the first time in California history, not only were the abusers prosecuted, but so were the social workers who had ignored repeated warnings. The case of Gabriel Fernandez wasn't just about the unimaginable cruelty of two people. It became an indictment of a broken system and a test of whether justice could reach beyond the courtroom. The tragic death of Gabriel Fernandez wasn't a lightning strike. It was a slow-motion disaster visible to many, ignored by most. Over 8 months, multiple warning signs screamed out from behind closed doors, and each one was systematically dismissed by the very institutions tasked with protecting children. Gabriel's teacher, Jennifer Garcia, was the first to sound the alarm. During his first week in her classroom, he arrived with bruises on his face. When she asked what happened, Gabriel shyly replied that his mom had hit him. Alarmed, Garcia filed a report with the Department of Children and Family Services, DCFS. But days turned into weeks, and nothing changed. The abuse didn't just continue, it escalated. Gabriel once arrived at school with chunks of hair missing. Another time, he had whip marks on his legs. Garcia called DCFS repeatedly. Each time, a caseworker would eventually visit the home and mark it down as non-emergency. No one removed Gabriel. No one conducted thorough follow-ups. His desperate pleas were buried in paperwork. School staff weren't the only ones who noticed. A security guard at the Department of Public Social Services reported seeing Gabriel covered in bruises. A therapist, assigned after one DCFS referral, reported concerns that Gabriel was being hurt at home. Even family members contacted authorities to express concern. In all, at least 6 documented reports were filed about Gabriel's abuse. Yet, the bureaucratic machinery moved at a crawl. Caseworkers were overloaded, supervisors failed to follow protocol, and the official response was always the same: delay, minimize, deflect. One of the most disturbing revelations came during the trial of the social workers. Emails and internal memos showed that DCFS staff sometimes falsified records or downplayed the severity of Gabriel's injuries. In one visit, a caseworker documented that Gabriel appeared healthy, despite visible injuries that other adults had witnessed that same week. A core problem was lack of coordination. DCFS, law enforcement, school officials, and healthcare providers all had pieces of the puzzle, but no one connected them. Each agency operated in isolation, assuming someone else would act. Even when Gabriel himself made statements, they were disregarded. In one instance, he told a counselor that his mother hit him with a belt until he bled. The counselor passed the report to her supervisor. No investigation followed. In retrospect, it's clear that Gabriel didn't die from a single act of violence. He died from a system's inability to protect him. Each ignored report and missed opportunity added up to a fatal silence. The DCFS response after Gabriel's death was swift but largely symbolic. For employees were fired and later charged with felony child abuse and falsifying public records. It was the first time in California history that social workers faced criminal prosecution in such a case. But many questioned whether these charges were about justice or public relations. Critics argued that the system itself was built to fail. Social workers were underpaid, overworked, and poorly trained. Supervisors emphasized closing cases quickly rather than investigating them thoroughly. The culture at DCFS, many claimed, prioritized statistics over safety. As the trial approached, the county defended its staff, saying they were scapegoats for a much larger failure. But for Gabriel's family and the public, it wasn't enough. They wanted accountability, not excuses. Gabriel Fernandez became the face of a broken child welfare system. His story highlighted how bureaucracy, fear, and apathy can allow even the most horrific abuse to go unchecked. He wasn't just failed by 2 people. He was failed by an entire structure built to protect him. By the time Gabriel Fernandez and Isauro Aguirre were brought to trial, public outrage had reached a boiling point. The horrific details of Gabriel's abuse had ignited protests, sparked legislative inquiries, and sent shockwaves across the nation. The courtroom became the stage not only for justice but for the public's grief, anger, and thirst for answers. Gabriel Fernandez and Isauro Aguirre were both charged with first-degree murder, with special circumstances of torture. Prosecutors described the case as one of the most horrific examples of child abuse they had ever encountered. The state announced early on that it would seek the death penalty against Aguirre, who was believed to have inflicted the majority of the violence. The trial of Isauro Aguirre began in 2017, 4 years after Gabriel's death. Jurors heard disturbing, graphic testimony from paramedics, teachers, and medical experts. Images of Gabriel's injuries, shown in court, moved seasoned professionals to tears. The prosecutor argued that Aguirre had systematically tortured Gabriel because he believed the boy was gay. Witnesses testified that Aguirre would call Gabriel derogatory names, beat him for playing with dolls, and force him to wear girls' clothing. During the trial, Aguirre's defense team attempted to portray him as slow-witted and easily manipulated by Pearl. They claimed he had no prior history of violence and had been overwhelmed by parenting duties. But the evidence was overwhelming. Jurors were shown BB gun pellets found in Gabriel's lungs, burn marks on his body, and autopsy photos that revealed fractured bones and internal injuries. The jury found Isauro Aguirre guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances of torture. During the penalty phase, emotional victim impact statements were delivered by Gabriel's relatives and his former teacher. Ultimately, the jury recommended the death penalty, and the judge upheld the sentence. Pearl Fernandez, meanwhile, took a different path. In 2018, she pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and admitted the special circumstance of intentional murder by torture. By avoiding trial, she spared herself the possibility of a death sentence. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The trials provided a form of justice, but for many, they felt incomplete. While Aguirre and Fernandez were held accountable, questions remained. Why hadn't someone intervened earlier? How could so many reports be ignored? The courtroom was not just a space for verdicts. It became a mirror, reflecting society's failure to protect its most vulnerable. As witnesses recounted Gabriel's final months, each new fact underscored the collective inaction that allowed his torture to continue. The case of Gabriel Fernandez shook the nation, but the deeper question still lingers. Did justice arrive too late? While his abusers were convicted and the courts made headlines with their unprecedented decisions, the trauma Gabriel endured continues to echo far beyond Palmdale, California. His story forced the public to confront the brutal reality that child abuse can, and often does, hide in plain sight. Following the verdicts, media attention did not fade. A Netflix docuseries titled The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez reignited national debate, giving voice to social workers, journalists, and those who had tried to save Gabriel. The series became a cultural lightning rod, drawing millions of viewers and placing pressure on public officials to reform child welfare policies. In response, California lawmakers proposed several changes. There were efforts to restructure DCFS oversight, introduce new training protocols for caseworkers, and increase communication between agencies like schools and law enforcement. While some reforms were implemented, critics argue that systemic change has been slow and inconsistent. The bureaucracy Gabriel fell through still exists, and still risks failing others. At the heart of this tragedy is a haunting truth. Gabriel wanted help. He asked for it repeatedly. He expressed love even while enduring unimaginable pain. His letters to his teacher, his affection for classmates, and his hope for a future show a child who had not given up. That resilience, alongside the inaction of adults, is what makes his story so painful. Memorials were held in Palmdale and beyond. Schools introduced anti-abuse education programs. Advocacy groups launched campaigns in Gabriel's name, including initiatives to educate teachers on spotting abuse and to push for harsher penalties for abusers. Gabriel's face, once known for tragedy, became a symbol of hope and of change. But change, many say, hasn't come fast enough. In the years since Gabriel's death, other children in California and around the U.S. have died under similar circumstances. Their cases, though not as public, mirror the same failures. Ignored reports, missed warning signs, and inadequate intervention. Gabriel's case became the spotlight, but it also exposed the shadows. Some believe the prosecution of the social workers was a turning point. Others argue it created a culture of fear that led to caseworkers being more focused on legal liability than the welfare of children. The tension between accountability and practicality continues to shape the future of child welfare. As for Pearl Fernandez and Isauro Aguirre, they remain behind bars, Pearl serving life without parole, Aguirre on death row. But Gabriel's story is not about their punishment. It's about whether the systems we trust can truly protect the vulnerable. Gabriel once asked his teacher, "Is it normal for moms to hit their kids?" That simple, heartbreaking question should never be answered with silence. His voice, small but determined, must now serve as a reminder, a rallying cry, and a demand for vigilance. The legacy of Gabriel Fernandez isn't found in the courtroom. It lives on in every child protection law reformed, every teacher more alert, every neighbor who makes that one crucial phone call. Justice, in his case, may have come too late, but it doesn't have to come too late for the next child.